Okay, so Shabbat Tov, everyone.
Tov.
We're in Shmuel, Aleph, chapter 13. Shaul is about to start the battle against the Pelishtim, the Philistines, who were the major enemy of the people at the time. Let's just have a look at the area that we're talking about. Let's just go on to our favorite map. Let me just share the screen with you. Okay, you can see that now, yeah? Okay. Oh, I don't think I muted you, but anyway, those of you that need to be muted can mute yourselves. Right, so we can see on the map here that the Philistine strongholds was over here, Ashdod, Ashkelon, Gaza, Lachish, and all this action is going on to the northeast of Jerusalem, around about where the A and the M are of Benjamin on this map. Okay, now if I just keep that in your mind, because the Pelishtim have left their stronghold here and have moved inland considerably, not just over here to Benjamin, but they've moved inland eastwards into the territory of Judah as well. And this aggravation now is going on over here in the northeast area of Jerusalem. So you can see that the Philistines have actually encroached into Eretz Israel quite considerably. So that's the first thing to note there. Let me just mute everybody. There we go. Right. So let me now.
I'm sorry. I have to unmute and just say something. You're saying now the Philistines have now encroached into Eretz Yisrael proper. I'm thinking Palestinian. You know, it's like I don't want to get too political, but it's interesting. It's very relevant. Okay.
Well, I don't think it's a coincidence. Let's put it that way. I wanted to show you this map next. Right. Let me show you with this screen. So you've seen the tribal map. Now we've got this map over here, which I hope you can see. Yeah, okay. So that little blob over there is Gilgal. Gilgal, remember Gilgal? Gilgal was the place where the Israelites first camped when they crossed over this thing here, which of course is the Jordan River. Can you see this squiggly line here is the Jordan River? And that's where they crossed over with Joshua. Gilgal was where they encamped. Now, where this action is going on is over here in the northeast of Jerusalem. This is where the action is going on around here. And we'll see another map later on which shows that. So you can see how far, let's just go up a bit. You can see how far from the Philistine stronghold of Ashdod, Ashkelon, Gaza, you can see how far they've encroached into the land of Israel. They're almost, they're well over halfway towards the Jordan River, which is the border. So we have this sort of idealized idea, if you like, that at this time, after Joshua had conquered the land, that we were just, sitting pretty there, and we had the odd little skirmish now and again. It's really not that. That is not the case. There was very little time in our history where we were in charge of the whole land of Israel. We've not got there yet. It happened during the reign of King David, but it was very short-lived. The time that we are living in now where we have Jewish sovereignty over all of this area of Israel, is probably now, not probably, is definitely now the greatest time in history in terms of the amount of territory that we are controlling as a sovereign nation, and for the length of time that we are controlling it. So I think that's something that we need to bear in mind. You know, rose-tinted spectacles looking backwards are very a common occurrence. So we look back at the time of the temple, the time of the Bet HaMikdash, the time of Shaul HaMelech and the Shoftim and Yehoshua, and we talk about the conquest of the land. Well, it really was not so great. And here this is a good example. You can see from Gaza. Oh, I've gone a bit too far there. Hang on a minute. Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod, all the way over here. And you'll see later on in the chapter how much control the Philistines have. They control all the major routes, R-O-U-T-E-S routes, in central Israel here. And we can see that the Bnei Israel are by no means sovereign in this entire land. And I think that's just something that needs to be pointed out. Okay, so let's now go and see what's actually going on in the Psukim. You should be able to see the text now. Yeah, okay. Right, so we spoke last week about this peculiar pasuk of Shaul being 1 year old and reigning for 2 years, and we went into that in some detail and indicated that the psukim were defective in some way, as an indication that Shaul's reign was in itself somewhat defective. And we spoke about verse 2. We showed you where the places were of Michmash and Bet El. Let me show you a picture of that now. Don't know if I'm able to get this up. Hang on a sec. Are you able to see that map? No. Okay, so let me stop the share and try again. How about now? Yeah. Okay, let me enlarge it. So there's a map that you can see of Binyamin. You can see Jerusalem over here, also known as Yevus. There's Givat Shaul, also known as Givat Binyamin. Excuse me 1 sec, I need to take this. Hello. Okay, hang on a sec. 1 sec, there's somebody at the door. I have to let them in. Talk amongst yourselves for half a minute.
Bruba.
Mutter. We didn't visit you yesterday, Leon, when we were downstairs in your block.
Oh, yes, everybody.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you can see on the map here, this is Jerusalem. This is Givat Shaul, also known as Givat Binyamin. There is Michmas, which is the place where the troops were. And we'll see in a minute, in a few minutes, we'll see these three places: Bet Choron on the left-hand side of the screen, Bet El in the middle, and Ophrah at the top. And just to give you an idea of where we are, Jericho is on the right-hand side over here. So that is the areas that we are talking about. So let's go back to the Psukim now. And we spoke about those areas, and then let's go from verse 3, Leon, please.
Jonathan slew the Philistine commissioner in Gava, and the Philistines heard about it. Saul had the shofar blowing throughout the land, announcing, "Let the Hebrews hear."
Let's just stop there, Leon, for a second. So Jonathan, again, we mentioned this last week. We're not told yet who Jonathan is. We should have been told who Jonathan is, because although we know who Jonathan was, because we've read the story on, if you're looking at this with fresh eyes, you had no idea who Jonathan is. You wouldn't know that Jonathan was the son of Shaul. And again, that was one of the defectiveness. I don't know if that's the right word. Defects. Yeah, that's what I want. Yes, sorry, Michael. That was one of the defects in the psukim that we spoke about last week. So Jonathan smote the governor of the Plishtim. Well, that was probably a fairly what's the word? Aggressive sort of act, really provocative sort of act for Jonathan to kill the Philistine governor, and that was really a declaration of war. To kill the Philistine governor in this area was a declaration of war. And that's why Shaul sounded the shofar throughout all the land. Because what was the shofar? What was the purpose of the shofar being sounded at this point?
A rallying cry?
Yeah, it was a rallying cry. That's exactly right. It was the sound of the shofar. The shofar was the sound to announce, if you like, this is war, guys. This is time to rally round. A rallying cry, as you say, Michael. So this was the beginning of the war against the Pelishtim at this time. So verse 4.
All Israel heard the announcement, saying, "Saul has slain the Philistine commissioner, and Israel has become despicable in the eyes of the Philistines." And the people were summoned to Saul at Gilgal.
Okay, let's just stop there. What's a bit odd about that pasuk?
It wasn't Saul who killed him.
Correct. It wasn't Saul who killed him at all, was it? It was Jonathan. So why does it say Saul?
Did he arrange for Jonathan to murder the prefects?
We don't know, do we? But I think you're on the right lines, Michael, because Shaul's the king. And remember, he's now, at the end of the previous chapter, he was accepted as king by everybody. Remember, originally, not everybody was overly impressed with him, and there were certain people that went home and didn't bring him a tribute and thought he wasn't really up to the job. And then, if you remember, at the end of the previous chapter, he had a stunning victory against, does anybody remember who it was? Who he had a stunning victory against, which sealed his position as king? Any offers?
Moab?
Nachash the Ammonite. Remember that? Let's just go back and have a quick look. Chapter 12, just to show you that I'm actually not telling you porkies. There we go. Nachash. And when you saw that Nachash, the king of Ammon, came upon you, you said, "No, but a king shall rule over us." And so we had the battle with Nachash, who had gone to Givat Yavesh and had wanted to cut the ears off, remember, of everybody, and Shaul defeated him. So that was Shaul had now cemented his place as king, and therefore he's the leader, he's the unchallenged leader of Israel. And therefore, even though it was Jonathan that did it, the pasuk tells us that Israel heard saying that Shaul had smitten the officer of the Plishtim. And what had that happened? V'gam nivash Yisrael ba'Plishtim. Israel had become hateful to the Philistines. In other words, that had provoked them into enmity towards the Israelites. And so therefore what happened was Vayitzaku ha'am. Now, this is interesting, isn't it? How does your art scroll translate Vayitzaku?
They were summoned, and the people were summoned to Saul.
Okay, that's a better translation than what we have here. Okay, and there was some. What is the root of that word Vayitzaku?
Bloody iron cuff.
Yes, that's right. And where do we see that in what context usually?
That's to cry out, isn't it? Tzaka Gedolah.
Correct, exactly. Tzaka Gedolah, a great cry. It's to cry out. Vayitzaku means they cried out, usually meaning they cry out either in pain or in despair. It's usually a word of despair. And so I think that's why this is chosen here, because it doesn't mean they gathered there. It means that they, because if it was they gathered there, it would be vayeyasfu ha'am, from the word le'esof, to gather or to collect. So vayitzaku has definite connotations, as Barbara says, of something not good, a cry out, and usually a cry out in distress. So the people here are distressed. And where do they go to? They go to Shaul in Gilgal. Now, can I ask you to cast your minds back a few weeks and tell me why Shaul is in Gilgal? Let me just show you that map again. Which map was it? Let me show you the map. It's over here, I think. One sec. There it is. Why was he gone to Gilgal when all the action is over here, just northeast of Jerusalem, southeast of Ramallah, where my pointer is? So why have they all run off to Gilgal all the way up there? It's a bit of a schlep. Puts them at a significant disadvantage. If the Philistine troops are here, we're giving them a free rein over there. If we're gathering our troops all the way over on the eastern border, almost on the Jordan River, why have they gone to Gilgal? And the answer to that lies in what we learnt a few weeks ago. Any ideas?
Is that where the ark was at the time?
Is that where the ark was at the time? It might have been. It probably was. It probably was. Any other suggestions as to why Shaul went to Gilgal?
A suitable place to organise his forces before going towards the Philistines.
Well, I don't think it is, Michael. I think it's a bad place to go to, because you've given the Philistine this free rein here. If you wanted to gather your troops, you'd gather them close to where they are to prevent them from going in further. So,
if you want to prepare your troops for battle, you don't want to be too close to the enemy. If you're getting people from all the different tribes, soldiers from all the different tribes, you've got to meld them together and then move as a group rather than go too close to the Philistine.
Okay, all right, I'll buy it for the moment, but that's not why you went to Gilgal. Well, I'll tell you why you went to Gilgal. Let's see if we can find in Shmuel chapter 9, which we have learned together a few weeks ago. Chapter 9, verse 25.
When they descended from the high place to the city, he spoke with Saul on the rooftop. They arose early the next morning, and at daybreak Samuel called Saul to the roof, saying, "Arise, I will send you off." So Saul arose, and the two of them, he and Samuel, went outside. As they were going down at the edge of town, Samuel said to Saul, "Tell the attendant to go on ahead of us." So he passed ahead. "You stand here now, and I will let you hear the word of God."
Okay, so what's going on here? This, if I remind you, is when Shaul had gone out looking for his donkeys, had met Shmuel. Shmuel had told him, "You're going to be king." And they had this secret discussion. How do we know it's a secret discussion? Because they got rid of the servant. They told the servant to go on ahead, and they spoke together out of earshot of anybody else. And he says, "You stand still, and I shall let you hear the word of God." This is what God's plan was for him. And then we go on to chapter 10. So what did he say to you? This is what Shmuel said. He said, well, let's read it. Chapter 10, Leon, verse 1.
Then Samuel took a flask of oil and poured some onto Saul's head, and he kissed him. He said, "Indeed, Hashem has appointed you as ruler over his heritage."
Okay, let's just stop there. So this is the coronation, the first coronation of Shmuel. And then he goes on to say, he gives them the prophecy, you're going to meet these people, and they're going to give you this food, etc. And then you're going to prophesy, remember, and you're going to be turned into a new man. You probably remember all this now. And then what did he tell him to do? If you go to verse 8, please.
"Then you shall go down to Gilgal ahead of me. Behold, I will go down to you to offer burnt offerings, to slaughter peace offerings. You shall wait for 7 days until I come to you, and I will inform you what you are to do."
Okay, so why, I'll ask the question again, why did Shaul go to Gilgal? Because Shmuel told him to do that. You've just read it. "You shall come down before me to Gilgal, and I shall go down and offer up burnt offerings. You shall wait for me for 7 days." Listen carefully, but this is important. 7 days you shall wait until I come to you, and I will tell you what to do. So Shmuel's instructions from God. This is a private thing. We've just read it at the end of the previous chapter. Shmuel and Shaul were on the top of the area there before he was to take his leave of Shmuel. He was told to go to Gilgal and to wait there for 7 days until Shmuel came and told him what to do. So that is why he went to Gilgal, because that's what Shmuel told him to do. So we're back in chapter 13 now. The people have said, Saul has smitten the officer of the Philistines. Israel has become hateful to the Philistines. Vayitzaku ha'am acharei Shaul hagilgal. So this word tza'aku that Barbara correctly pointed out is from a cry out. The people are crying out now. They're scared because they've stirred up the hornet's nest. Jonathan has stirred up the hornet's nest by killing the Philistine governor, and now they're scared. So they all gather at Gilgal. And the reason they go to Gilgal is because Shaul is there, and Shaul is there because Shmuel told him to go there. And we're going to see what happens next. Now, verse 5.
The Philistines gathered to wage war against Israel with 30,000 chariots, 6,000 cavalry, and foot soldiers as numerous as the sand of the seashore. They went up and encamped at Michmas, east of Beit Aven.
Okay, so let's just get this out of the way straight away. I think it's about time, I think, that I did a separate shiur dedicated to numbers in Tanakh, because it's the elephant in the room every time we come across this. 30,000 chariots. Chariots here are the equivalent of, I think Philip's just joined just right at the right time, because we're talking about military hardware, Philip, okay? Just up your street.
Chariots
So,
are equivalent to tanks today.
correct. Chariots are equivalent of tanks. Now,
And there's no army in the world today that has 30,000 tanks. Not one.
Right. There's no army that has 30,000 tanks. Okay, thank you, Philip. Just right on cue there. Now, just to get this in perspective, everyone, let's just remember, 1 second, Philip, 1 second, Philip, 1 second. Let's just remember, let's just get this into perspective. Go back in history. When was Am Yisrael's first and most stunning victory against an enemy?
The crossing of the Red Sea.
The crossing of the Red Sea.
And the Egyptians had 600 chariots then.
Very good, Philip. Very good. Let's just go to Shemot, chapter 14. It's on the screen for you now. I hope you can see that. Yes? No, you can't see that. Leon's saying yes, he can. Michael's saying no, he can't.
Do you need to get rid of the share screen and go back in again?
Can't see it. Yeah.
Okay, I'll stop it and start it again, because sort of strangely some people can and some people can't. That's a bit weird. Anyway, it doesn't matter. There we go. You should all be able to see it in a second. There we go.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone can see it apart from you, Michael. So I think it must be something at your end. So we'll have to read it for you very carefully. This is Sefer Shmot, and it is, of course, in the parasha of Beshalach. It's the Shirat Hayam, and this is what happened. Go from verse 5, Leon, please.
It was told to the king of Egypt that the people had fled, and the heart of Pharaoh and his servants became transformed regarding the people. And they said, "What is this that we have done, that we have sent away Israel from serving us?" He harnessed his chariot and attracted his people with him. He took 600 elite chariots and all the chariots of Egypt with officers on them all.
Okay, let's just stop there. We know what happened after that. The point of me getting that up on the screen was the 600 select chariots and all the chariots of Egypt. So the 1 sec, Philip. So Pharaoh actually took more than 600 chariots. He took 600 top chariots and then all the chariots of Egypt. But we're talking here about 50 times the number of chariots or thereabouts, a lot anyway. So if we go back to our psukim here of 30,000 chariots, there is no way that the Pelishti army had 30,000 chariots. And even if they did have 30,000 chariots, they would not have had 30,000 chariots all in one place there. Yes, Philip?
Okay. The 600 chariots plus the second ranked chariots which Egypt had, which they don't say how many there are, but 600 chariots is, funnily enough, about the number of Merkava 4s that Israel has today. Funnily enough, Merkava 4 is the top Israeli tank today. They have more at second rank, but they have about 600. Actually, they're aiming for 660. That's number one. Number two, there might be a mistake here talking about the Plishtim. The Plishtim might have had 6,000 chariots and 30,000 horsemen, because 30,000 chariots and 6,000 horsemen seems to be, contrary to any logic. They would have been a very, very big army then.
Okay, so you I don't know whether there's mistakes or what there is. We need to do we're going to do a separate share on the numbers, but you're quite right to point out that these numbers cannot be taken literally.
No.
We just for the moment, let's just suffice ourselves with the knowledge that they had a big force at least relative to the Israelites, they had a big force. Remember how many troops did the Israelites have at this particular point, according to the Tanakh that we just read last week?
60,000?
No, let's have a look. Verse 2, Leon.
Oh,
In our chapter
that's all.
13.
3,000 troops from Israel, 2,000
6,000
with
all in all, yeah.
Saul, and 1,000 with Jonathan.
Yeah, so we had 3,000, that's all. And they've got 30,000 chariots, and we've got 3,000 troops. The idea of that, well, what's the ratio of 30,000 to 3,000? Is 32 is 10 to 1, isn't it? So they've got 10 times more chariots than we've got soldiers. The idea that
Johnny,
one second, Philip. What
okay.
they're saying here, what the Tanakh is telling us is that that the Am Yisrael were utterly outnumbered from top to bottom. And at the moment, we're not going to take these figures literally. We're just going to accept that this was a huge differential between the Pelishtim and the Israelites. Yes, Philip?
Actually, this morning I read a commentary that says that according to the rules of war, not the rules, what do you call it? The statistics is that if one country attacks another, as is happening today in the world, it's very topical. One should have a numerical advantage of 3 to 1.
Okay.
Here you have a much bigger one. And today in Russia and Ukraine, you don't have. It's about 1 to 1, and the Russians are heading for big trouble.
That's very interesting. Thank you for that, Philip. So we can see that from, again, you know, if we sort of superimpose that information from Philip over here, we can see what the Tanakh is trying to do. The Tanakh is trying to point out to us, you know, in neon lights, as it were, how outrun they were by the outnumbered they were by the Pelishtim. Let's carry on and see what happens. They had 30,000 chariots and 6,000 riders, and people as numerous as the sand on the seashore. And they've got hundreds of thousands of foot soldiers as well. Right, number 6, verse 6.
The men of Israel saw that they were in trouble, for the people were hard pressed, and the people hid in caves and in fortresses, and in rocks and in towers and in pits.
Okay, let's stop there for a sec. Just want to point out to those of you who were at the shiur yesterday, there's our word again that we spoke a little bit about yesterday. V'ish Yisrael ra'u, and the men of Israel saw ki tsar lo. He was in distress. For those of you that weren't at the shiur yesterday, we came across, a little incidentally, but we came across the famous pasuk that many people say twice a day, and that we in this community say once a day, and that is the beginning of Tachanun. Vayomer David el Gad tsar li ma'od, and David said to Gad, I am in big trouble. Tsar li ma'od. The word tsar is the same root as tsoros. There's one for Anita, a little bit of Yiddish thrown in there. Tsar is the same root as tsoros, or tsoros is the same root of tsar, really. Tsoros is actually the plural, because the plural of tsar is tsarot. And if you pronounce that with an Ashkenazi pronunciation, it's tsaros, and then it's not very far to get to the Yiddish of tsoros. Okay, so tsar, ki tsar lo. They saw that they were in big trouble here. Why were they in big trouble? Obviously, they were in big trouble because of verse 5, because they're so outnumbered here. So what did they do? They ran away. They did not stand up with King Shaul and battle. They did not stand up with King Shaul and say, God will save us. They didn't cry out to Hashem, although I wonder whether they did because of that word that we had before, vayitzaku, over here. But we're not told explicitly that they beseeched God for a savior. They just ran away, and they hid. They hid in caves, and they hid in the thickets, and they hid in amongst the rocks, and wherever they could find a hiding place. And some of them actually did a proper runner. Verse 7.
Some Hebrews even crossed the Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead. Saul was still in Gilgal, and all the people who remained hurried after him.
Okay, let's just stop there and just whiz over to the map. They're in Gilgal, and the Pasuk says what? Some of the Hebrews crossed the Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead. So not very far, is it? Gilgal, of course, was the place, that's why I got this map up, was the place they crossed over to with Yehoshua. It was their first base camp. So it's very close to the Jordan River. This is where they set up base camp to attack Jericho all those hundreds of years earlier. So this Gilgal is very close to the River Jordan, as you can see on the map. And this area is the area of the territory of Gad. Let me show you our map, if I can. There it is. See the map? Yeah. Okay, so there it is. You see there's the Jordan River. That's Gilgal is probably round about just a little bit below that J of Jordan River. They go over the river into the territory of Gad. So that's they're running away. You can see that from the map there. The Sukkim are telling us very clearly that they are running away. Let me just get the Sukkim back up on the screen. Okay, so they ran away. Now we come back to the point that I wanted to make to you when I took you back earlier on in the book of Shmuel. Verse 8.
He waited 7 days for the time set by Samuel, but Samuel did not arrive at Gilgal, so the people began to disband from him.
Let's just stop there a minute. I wanted to get, before we do that verse, there was something in verse 7 that I wanted to point out to you that I didn't do. I forgot first time around. So some of the Hebrews crossed the Jordan to the land of Gad. I've just shown you that. Shaul was still in Gilgal. And how did you translate the end of verse 7, Leon?
And all the people who remained hurried after him.
Okay, now that's how it's translated here on the screen as well. I'm looking in the Steinsaltz, and he says, all the people, the army, hastened after him. So that's the same translation. Let me have a look at the Koren translation now. See if
I've gone, the rest of the people rallied to him in alarm.
You've got, that's interesting, Michael. The rest of the people rallied to him in alarm. Okay, let me just see what our verse says. Now, I'm looking in this book here. Okay, I think I've shown it to you before. It's the Koren Tanakh, beautifully produced book. It's called the Koren Tanakh of the Land of Israel. And this is obviously Shmuel, the book of Shmuel. This was given to me as a gift by David Marks, for which I thank him again. Now they have got the translation in here, much more accurate translation. Listen carefully. And some of the Hebrews crossed the Jordan to the land of Gad and the Gilead, while Shaul remained at Gilgal with all the men trembling behind him. Very different. Leon and our translation here and the Steinsaltz all use an expression of hurrying or hastening. Michael, yours was a bit halfway house. What did you say again, Michael?
And the rest of the people rallied to him in alarm.
Rallied to him in alarm. So there's some negativity there. They're a bit scared. They're in alarm. And the Koren is the best translation of all. Says, I'll read it again. While Shaul remained at Gilgal with all the men trembling behind him. Now, look at the word that I'm translating, that I'm getting fixated upon here. There it is. V'chol ha'am charadu acharav. Charada is a trembling. Where have you heard that word before? Charada.
Is it at the giving
Before
of the
Mount Sinai, at the
Yeah.
when the Ten Commandments were given.
There was a great trembling. Correct. Charada is a trembling.
Yeah.
We also see it in Yitzchak and Esav. When with the brachot, when Esav comes in and says to Yitzchak, give me a bracha, and Yitzchak, the penny drops that Yaakov has taken Esav's bracha, he trembled a great tremble, charada gedola, a trembling. Charada means a trembling. Where have you seen that word before in colloquial use?
Charada.
Isn't that Haredi?
It is, Avril. Yes, welcome back, Avril. We've missed you. Yes, you're quite right, Avril. Charedim come from the word charedim. Comes
I couldn't unmute.
Yeah, you've managed to do it now, Faye. Yeah, the charedim are theoretically people who tremble before God because they're meant to be very God-fearing. And they are charedim, they are tremblers. The word charedim literally means tremblers.
Trembler means an earthquake also.
I'm not sure what the Hebrew word for earthquake is.
Re'idat adama, re'idah.
Okay, so it's not the same word. It's not the same word. I didn't think it was, but anyway,
No.
Charedim means people who are trembling people. And the reason that particular group of people are called Charedim is because they are trembling before God in piety. So that is the word chardu, and it has in the Tanakh, it has a very negative connotation of fear, and of dread, not just fear, of dread. If you think about how Yitzchak must have felt at that time when he realized that this whole brachot business had gone horribly wrong as far as he was concerned, and the wrong brother had taken this bracha, and he trembled a great tremble. It must have been a very dreadful, in the true sense of the word, a dreadful experience. Same when the people were at Har Sinai. This was they were full of dread. They were full of fear. So fearful were they that they told Moshe Rabbeinu, stop. We can't hear these words from God. You stand in between us and be a vehicle for us to hear from Hashem. We can't do it directly. We're too fearful. So for Chol Ha'am Chardu Acharav, I don't think that the translation on the screen or the art scroll or the Steinsaltz does that pasuk justice. I think that the Koren here does it perfect justice, and it says Shaul remained at Gilgal with all the men trembling behind him. Exactly an accurate translation. So that's what I wanted to point out from that pasuk 7. Right, now verse 8. Say it again for us, Leon. Verse 8.
He waited 7 days for the time set by Samuel, but Samuel did not arrive at Gilgal, so the people began to disband from him.
Okay, so remember what we said back over in chapter 10. He says, verse 8, chapter 10, verse 8, Leon, it's on the screen for you, everyone.
Then you shall go down to Gilgal ahead of me. Behold, I will go down to you to offer burnt offerings, to slaughter peace offerings. You shall wait 7 days until I come to you, and I will inform you what you are to do.
So that is the 7 days that our verse, now on the screen for you, also verse 8, but this time chapter 13, that is the 7 days that he's talking about. He says here, and he waited 7 days until the time when which Shmuel had set to come, and he didn't come. Shmuel did not come. Well, and the people scattered from him. Vayafetz ha'am me'alav. What does that give you a mental picture of? The people scattered from him, meaning from Shaul. Deserting. Yeah, we already know they're deserting, don't we, Michael? Because they've run off. They've even crossed the Jordan. They've run off to Gad. They've run off, and verse 6 is very explicit. It doesn't just say the people hid. It said they hid in caves and thickets and rocky crags and towers and pits and anywhere they could find. They were absolutely scared stiff. And now they've started to desert their king. It's almost, you have this mental picture of Shaul at Gilgal saying, hey, wait, come back. And everyone's running away saying, we're not hanging around with you, mates. There's 30,000 chariots on the way. You said Shmuel was going to be here in 7 days. He ain't come. What does that remind you of?
Moshe. 40
yes.
days.
Another comparison. We've spent many weeks, haven't we, comparing the Shmuel situation to the Moshe situation. We had many comparisons of Shmuel to Moshe, the way Shmuel spoke, the way he took his leave of the people in chapter 9 and 10. No, not 9 and 10, 10 and 11. So this is a very, very clear comparison to the Chet HaEgel. What happened at the Chet HaEgel? We read it just a couple of weeks ago, not even, just a week and a day ago in Parashat Ki Tisa. What did we read? We read that
the people deserted Moses and God for the golden calf.
Correct. Let's have a look at Shemot chapter 32. Shemot chapter 32. Whenever you're ready, Leon.
Yeah. Verse.
Start from the top.
Excuse me. The people saw that Moses had delayed in descending the mountain, and the people gathered around Aaron and said to him, rise up, make for us gods that will go before us. For this man Moses, who brought us up from Egypt, we do not know what became of him.
Okay, so this is exactly the same thing. Moshe was meant to arrive down from the mountain, and he didn't come. And we all know what happened there. What happened there was we descended into a very terrible sin of the golden calf. So here we've got a very, very similar situation. It bangs you between the eyes. He waited 7 days, and Shmuel didn't come at the appointed time that he was meant to come. And the people started to scatter. Now, if you were Shaul, and you know history, and you know that when the leader, although he's officially the leader, Shmuel is still, I suppose, ahead of him in the pecking order, failed to turn up last time. It ended in total disaster, and you knew that. Well, if you were Shaul, what would you do? Everyone's starting to run away. They're scared. Shmuel's not turned up. What would you do?
Start without him.
What wouldn't you do? What wouldn't you do, first of all?
Start without him.
You wouldn't want to make a golden calf, right? Because We know that that's what they did last time, and it did not end well. So you don't want to be going to make a golden calf. In other words, going off and abandoning God. In a way, Shaul here is Aaron HaKohen, isn't he? Because if Shmuel is Moshe and we're waiting for him to come, who was the one that was waiting for him? Who was sort of in temporary charge? And when Moshe was up in the top of Mount Sinai, as Anita just mouthed correctly there, it was Aaron. Aaron was in charge whilst Moshe was away. Who's in charge while Shmuel's away, while we're waiting for Shmuel? Shaul. In effect, Shaul is in the position that Aaron was in at the time of the golden calf. So Shaul will have known that Aaron messed up by getting the people to give gold and make a golden calf. So that's what you wouldn't do if you were Shaul. So if that's what you wouldn't do, what you would do is to try and do the opposite. Well, the opposite of serving an idol is to serve Hashem. So that's what he tried to do. Have a look at what he tried to do. Verse 9. Remember, just picture the scenario here. The scenario is everyone's panicking. People are running away. They're deserting. They're hiding in all sorts of places. They've run off and crossed the River Jordan. And whoever's not gone is starting to run away as well. So what does he do? Verse 9, Leon.
So Saul said, "Bring me the elevation offering and the peace offering." And he offered up the burnt offering.
Okay, let's stop there. I personally think that was a pretty reasonable thing to do. He thinks the time's up. Shmuel should be here. Shmuel doesn't come. Shaul says, okay, as Leon said, I'll have to start without him. And he didn't build a golden calf. He didn't do anything horrendous like that. What he did was he brought the burnt offering, or he asked for the burnt offering and the peace offering to be brought to him. Why did he do that?
Well, Samuel had already told him that's what he was going to do when he arrived 7 days later.
Yes, exactly, Leon. Let's go back to chapter 10. It's on the screen now. Verse 8 in chapter 10.
Then you shall go down to Gilgal ahead of me. Behold, I will go down to you to offer burnt offerings, to slaughter peace offerings. You shall wait for 7 days until I come to you, and I will inform you what you are to do.
So poor Shaul here, he doesn't know what to do. Shmuel's not turned up at the appointed time. So it seems to me a reasonable thing that Shaul did to start without him and to offer up the burnt offerings and peace offerings that Shmuel himself had told Shaul that he was going to do. Now, if I was to stop there, right? If I was to stop there and I was to ask you, don't read on now, and I was just to ask you the question, Shaul, score out of 10 for his behavior so far. I'd give him a good score. I'd give him a good 9 out of 10. He's done a good job. What's he meant to do? He's gone to Gilgal.
7.5 out of 10. 7.5 out of 10.
Why? Well, what's he done wrong?
I don't know. I know what's going to happen. Maybe that's why.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Same thing as with Putin now.
Okay, you know what's going on. Well, they're not getting into that, right? So yes, Barbara.
Shouldn't he try to rally the troops? I mean, God helps them that helps themselves.
Okay, but if you say that two things. Number one, in response to that, I would say, number one, Shmuel told him he was going to offer up burnt offerings and peace offerings. Okay. Number two, if I ask you to cast your mind back to chapter 7, if I'm not mistaken, of chapter 7 of Shmuel Aleph, we had the situation where Shmuel the last time they were fighting the Pelishtim, he offered up offerings, and then they went out and beat the living daylights out of the Pelishtim. So Shaul has actually got history on his side for doing these things. So yeah, I think he's got to rally the troops, but I think to do the burnt offerings and peace offerings first, I think it's hard to criticize him. I think it's hard to criticize him at this point. We don't know what Shmuel's going to now say to him, but right at this point, I think Shaul's done a good job. Shmuel does not think he's done a good job. Let's just end today with the next couple of psukim, and then we'll go into it in more detail next week. Verse 10.
It was just as he finished offering up the burnt offering, when behold, Samuel arrived, and Saul went forth to greet him. Samuel said, "What have you done?" Saul said, "Because I saw that the people were disbanding from me, and you had not arrived by the arranged day, that the Philistines were gathering at Michmas."
Okay, let's stop there, because there's loads and loads to talk about in those two psukim, and it's now time up. So we'll go into that in detail next week. If you want to think about what's going on in those two psukim, we can have a chat about that next week. Verses 10 and 11 is where we will continue from for next week. So where we're leaving it is that Shaul, according to my humble opinion, has done what I think it could be expected of him. Shmuel comes, whether he was late or not, we don't know. We're not told whether the calculation of Shaul was wrong and the people was wrong, and actually Shmuel came on time, or whether Shmuel came late. But ultimately, he came after they expected him. And he says, "What's going on? What have you done?" Implication, it's a criticism. And you'll see that Shaul takes it as a criticism because he starts to make excuses. And that's where we'll leave it now. And we'll talk about what he's done wrong and how he justifies himself, and Shmuel's response to his justification. Please God, we'll do that next week. Any questions so far?
I have, before we end, what is Mervin's name, his Hebrew name for davening?
Mervin Bloch is in hospital, and his Hebrew name is Michael Isaac ben Pesach HaKohen. I'll send it out.
No, female, mother. He's not dead.
Don't know.
His mother's name.
Don't know his mother's name.
Sarah. Say Sarah.
Sarah, you can say Sarah, or you can even use his father's name, Michael Isaac ben Pesach HaKohen. We'll do until we find his mother's name.
Okay.
I'll try and find it. Yes, Anita.
Shaul only did what he was told to do by Shmuel. So why is Shmuel getting all worked up with him?
Well, you'll see next week.
Ah, okay. I have to read ahead.
I think that's a very good question, and we will see next week the answer to that question.
Okay.
That actually is the nub of my question at this point. I think Shaul has done what he could be expected to do, and I think that Shmuel's given him a bit of a hard time. But we'll go into it in more detail next week. There's your cliffhanger. Same back channel, same back time. That's what they used to say at the end of Batman, didn't they? When he was hanging off the ledge by his fingertips. Any other questions?
Just one comment, Johnny.
Where do I go for Mincha today?
I respect what Philip said about the numbers. Just going back to the numbers. But when I first read that the Philistines had so many chariots and that was a precise number. Okay, it may be wrong, but when it went on to say, and the infantry were as the sand by the sea, then that is obviously not a specific number. So, when I first read it, I felt, well, that's not a specific number, but quoting the exact number of chariots would imply that they were able to count the chariots, but
Okay.
not the infantry.
I'll answer your question, Leon, by turning it on its head. What are the chances that the exact number of chariots was 30,000, a round number, and the exact number of horsemen was 6,000, a round number? Let me just tell you that when you're reading medical notes, if the blood pressure is 120/80, you can be pretty sure that somebody's cheated and have not actually measured it properly, because that is the textbook normal blood pressure, 120/80. And if you measure it correctly, properly, the chances of you getting round numbers like that on both of them are pretty small. If it said 122/79, I would be much more impressed that this was an accurate number. So if it had said the number of chariots were 31,254 and the number of horsemen were 6,426, then I would take your point. But I think that 30,000 chariots and 6,000 infantrymen are actually not exact numbers. I think that they are deliberately vague numbers, not counted to the one, and I think it fits in with the sand on the shore figure as well, because you say they had 30,000 chariots, which is like saying mental thing. Philip told us there's no army in the world today that's got 30,000 tanks. Remember, we're talking about small people here. Now, I'd be interested to know if anybody wants to do this little bit of research for me. If anybody can Google and do a bit of research, what was the total population of the land of Israel around this time? And we're talking about what, approximately 1000 BCE. So if somebody wants to take that on and find out what was the population, Philip,
I'll do it. Yeah.
Okay, so, and then we're going to have a look and see whether it's likely that a small section, remember the Philistines were only a small section of these people. There were Ammonites and Moabites and Canaanites and Girgashites and all the other ites that were there. Is it likely that they would have had 30,000 chariots? The answer
So
is
all the different population groups you want, the Jews, the Philistines,
whatever you can find out. Whatever you can find out.
Okay, all right. I'll let you know next week. Yeah.
Okay, excellent, very good. So I think that I think it's what we call in Hebrew guzma, exaggeration.
Yeah, yeah. Johnny,
yes,
can I ask you something which isn't connected to about
one sec, before you do that? Is there any other questions on the shiur? Then I'll stop recording and then I'll talk to you. Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to stop recording and there we go.